Good morning, sir. My name is Sanchez, and this is my presentation about Krashens' theory of second language acquisition. First off, a little background about Stephen Krashen. About 25 years ago, a psychologist named Stephen Krashen transformed language teaching. He had been developing his ideas over a number of years, but several books he published in the 1980s received widespread acceptance. So, Krashen's theory of second language acquisition consists of 5 main hypotheses. Number 1, the acquisition learning hypothesis. Number 2, the monitor hypothesis. Number 3, the natural order hypothesis. And number 4, the input hypothesis. And number 5, the effective filter hypothesis. The first one is the acquisition learning hypothesis. According to Krashen's acquisition learning hypothesis, there are 2 independent ways to develop our linguistic skills: the acquisition and the learning. This theory is at the core of modern language acquisition theory, and it is perhaps the most fundamental of Krashen's theories on second acquisition. The acquisition learning distinction is the most fundamental of the 5 in Krashen's theory, and the most widely known among linguists and language teachers. The acquired system or acquisition is the product of a subconscious process, very similar to the process children undergo when they acquire their first language. The learned system or learning is the product of formal instruction, and it comprises a conscious process which results in conscious knowledge about the language. For example, knowledge of grammar rules. According to Krashen, what is consciously learned through the presentation of rules and explanations of grammar does not become the basis of acquisition of the target language. Learning does not turn into acquisition or conscious learning process, and our subconscious acquisition process are mutually exclusive. This theory is at the core of modern language acquisition theory, and is perhaps the most fundamental of Krashen's theories on second acquisition. The second is the monitor hypothesis. Explains the relationship between acquisition and the learning. It defines the influence of the latter and the former. The monitoring function is the practical result of the learner learned grammar. According to Krashen, the acquisition system is the utterance initiator, while the learning system performs the role of the monitor or the editor. The monitor acts in a planning, editing, and correcting function when 3 specific conditions are met. Number 1, the acquirer/learner must know the rule. This is a very difficult condition to meet because it means that the speaker must have had explicit instruction. Number 2, the acquirer must be focused on correctness. He or she must be thinking about form, and it is difficult to focus on meaning and form at the same time. Number 3, having time to use the monitor. The speaker is then focused on form rather than meaning, resulting in the production and exchange of less information. It appears that the role of conscious learning is somewhat limited in second language performance. According to Krashen, the role of the monitor is minor, being used to correct deviations from normal speech and to give speech a more polished appearance. Krashen also suggests that there is individual variation among language learners with regard to monitor use. He distinguishes those learners that use the monitor all the time over users, those learners who have not learned or who prefer not to use their conscious knowledge or under the users, and those learners that use the monitor appropriately, optimal users. An evaluation of the person's psychological profile can help to determine to what group they belong. Usually extroverts are under users, while introverts and perfectionists are overusers. Lack of self-confidence is frequently related to overuse of the monitor. Now we proceed to number 3, the natural order hypothesis. The acquisition of grammatical structures follows a natural order which is predictable. English is perhaps the most studied language as far as natural order hypothesis is concerned, and at all structures of English, morphology is the most studied. For a given language, same grammatical structures tend to be acquired early while others are late. This order seems to be independent of the learner's age, language one background, conditions of exposure, and although the agreement between individual acquirers was not always 100% in the studies, there were statistically significant similarities that reinforce the existence of the natural order of language acquisition. Krashens, however, points out that the implication of the natural order hypothesis is not that a language program in syllabus should be based on the order found in the studies. In fact, he rejects grammatical sequencing when the goal is language acquisition. The order of acquisition for second language is not the same as the order of acquisition for the first, but these are some similarities. Krashens believes that the implication of the natural order hypothesis is not that our syllabi should be based on the order found in the studies. He rejects grammatical sequencing in all cases where the goal is language acquisition. The only instance in which the teaching of grammar can result in language acquisition and proficiency is when the students are interested in subject and the target language is used as a medium of instruction. The fourth hypothesis is the input hypothesis. The input hypothesis is Krashens' attempt to explain how the learner acquires a second language, how second language acquisition takes place. According to this hypothesis, the learner improves and progresses along the natural order when he/she receives second language input that is one step beyond his/her current stage of linguistic competence. Since not all the learners can be at the same level of linguistic competence at the same time, Krashens suggests that a natural communicative input is the key to designing a syllabus, ensuring in this way that each learner will receive some 1+1 input that is appropriate for his/her current stage of linguistic competence. For example, if learners at a stage 1, then acquisition takes place when he/she is exposed comprehensible input that belongs to a level 1+1. And finally, we acquire language only when we understand language that contains a structure that is a little beyond where are now. This is possible because we use more than our linguistic competence to help us understand. The input hypothesis says that we acquire by going to meaning first, and as a result, we acquire structure. It also states that speaking fluency cannot be taught directly. It emerges over time on its own. The best way to teach speaking, according to this view, is simply to provide comprehensible input. Early speech will come when the acquirer feels ready. It is typically not grammatically accurate. Accuracy develops over time as the acquirer hears and understands more output. And finally, the effective filter hypothesis, the final hypothesis of Krashens' hypothesis on second language acquisition. The effective filter hypothesis embodies Krashens' view that a number of effective variables play a facilitative but non-casual role in second language acquisition. These variables include motivation, self-confidence, anxiety, and personality traits. Krashens claims that learners with high motivation, self-confidence, a good self-image, a low level of anxiety, and extroversion are better equipped for success in second language acquisition. Low motivation, low self-esteem, anxiety, introversion, and inhibition can raise the effective filter and form a mental block that prevents comprehensible input from being used for acquisition. In other words, when the filter is up, it impedes language's acquisition. On the other hand, the positive effect is necessary but not sufficient on its own for acquisition to take place. Thank you so much for listening. Have a nice day. Again, this is Zyper John Sanchez presenting.